So, do we have item 7, Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company Limited Business and Investment Case for the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme. Do we have a group of people? Here we go. Good morning all. Right. As you settle in, I will invite you to introduce your team shortly. Dr. Pearce, Chairman of HBRIC. But in the way there, I might hand over to the Chief Executive just to give us a brief outline of the paper, perhaps, and where expectations, etc., are for today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's presentation is really a culmination of work that HBRIC's been undertaking on Council's behalf now for nearly 18 months. Back in October 2012, the Regional Council considered the feasibility study that had been prepared largely internally for the feasibility around the construction and operation of a water storage project in central Hawke's Bay around the Ruataniwha. And at that time, the Council resolved to hand over the responsibilities for really detailing all of that to our investment company, the Regional Investment Company. And so Dr. Pearce and his board and Mr. Newman and other staff of the board have been working towards getting the business case to a point where council can make a recommendation to council on whether or not to invest. Council has already consulted upon the investment of up to $80 million as its share of the Ruataniwha water storage project, but has further undertaken that should the business case recommend to council refine the recommendation around investing and actually suggest that council does invest that council resolved to undertake an additional special consultative process. So what you have in front of you under separate cover is the business case as it is that the HBRIC have prepared. I think the important things to note around this are that it's really the beginning of a process. For us, it's obviously nearly the end of the process almost for HBRIC, but it's certainly in terms of the Regional Council, it's a beginning of a fairly intensive process that we're going to be going through over the next few months to look at the findings of this business case, to have them independently peer reviewed, to then come up with a preferred option on whether or not you wish to invest, and then to go out and seek public comment on that, and then to consider those public comments before you make your final decision. So from my perspective, this is very much an opportunity for you to listen to what HBRIC has to say in its business case, to seek issues of clarification. I think the time for debate is not today, but further on, certainly among yourselves, but certainly I think there will be questions of clarification sought from HBRIC. So what we're asking you today in the recommendations is to receive this report, to note a number of points that have been made in it, because I think they provide a really good summary of where it's at, and to refer it to Deloitte for the independent peer review. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right, Dr. Pearce, who are you and who do you have with you?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and Councillors. So Andrew Newman on my right, who's currently the Chief Executive of HBRIC Ltd, I think probably needs no introduction. Professor Roger Marker on my immediate left is co-opted to our Ruataniwha Water Storage Committee of the Board to provide us with expertise in mana whenua matters and in matters to do with Māori environmental management. And on Professor Marker's left, Jim Scotland, who's another of the directors of HBRIC and is also the chair of Napier Port Limited. So, thank you for those words of introduction from the Chief Executive. Many of the things that she said I was going to say, and I'll repeat a few of them. But I wanted to begin by acknowledging, first of all, the huge amount of effort that has gone into this by Andrew Newman and his team. Other members of his team are here, particularly Graham Hanson and Stephen Daish, over not just the last 15 months or so, but over the period up to the feasibility stage when Council made a decision. Unfortunately, while this is the beginning of a process, and the Chief Executive is absolutely right in the sense that this is the beginning of a piece of process for Council, this is by no means anywhere near the end yet for HBRIC. We have a huge amount of work to do yet, and the conditions precedent, which are noted in this paper, are substantial, and all of them have yet to be satisfied, and satisfying them is still some time away. What I wanted to do, Chairman, if I could, is talk to 2 or 3 context-setting PowerPoint slides. Leanne, could you bring that up for me, please? And then I wanted to step through quite quickly the noting recommendations. I'll dwell on 1 or 2 of them, but I won't read them all out. I'm sure that they have been read. Thank you very much. So, the left-hand one. Thank you. So I wanted to begin with this slide, which I think sets things in a particular context. So the pie diagram here shows the flow volume of the Tukituki River at Red Bridge over the course of a year in an average year. So this is with its mean annual flow. There's close to 1.4 billion cubic metres of water flows under Red Bridge in an average year. At the Makarora Dam, the combined lighter blue and green wedges, the inflow, or the flow that goes past the dam site at the present time, again on an average year mean annual flow basis, 201 million cubic metres, about 14.5% of the total flow of the Tukituki catchment. And what is being proposed in this business case is to take and sell 104 million cubic metres out of that 201 million. 7.5% of the flow. One way of thinking about this is that the current Board of Inquiry process is considering whether and under what conditions should it grant a resource consent for the use of that 7.5% of the water resource of the Tukituki catchment. And similarly, in proposed Plan Change 6, among many other things that proposed Plan Change 6 proposes, the Board of Inquiry is considering what is the impact on the Tukituki River system and its ecosystems of using that 7.5% of the water resource. What's the impact of using that under the conditions that are proposed on the remaining 92.5% of the water resource? About 15 months ago, in December 2012, Council finally completed the process that began in September 2012 of transferring the RWSS project to HBRIC. And we were asked, as part of that, to prepare and submit resource consents, to develop a design and construction procurement process, and to select a contractor for the infrastructure works, to develop a legal and contractual framework for a concession from the Council, for investors and for the proposed operating entities of the RWSS, to undertake a capital raising process which is not yet completed, and to evaluate water user interest, to confirm a water price, and eventually to convert expressions of interest for purchasing water into water use contracts. And that process is not yet complete either. over what will be a 10-month period by the end of May when they produce their final decision. The Board of Inquiry will have considered the RWSS consents and Council's proposed Plan Change 6, including about 6,000 pages of evidence from us and about 28,000 pages of evidence in total. There are some in the past who have said that a Board of Inquiry process is a fast track kind of process, a quick and easy one. But I'd suggest to you that that amount of time and that amount of evidence for making a decision on whether or not to use 7.5% of the water resource in this catchment and the impacts of using that 7.5% on the other 92.5% it's probably a reasonably robust process. This chart, I think, sets out probably the core of the proposition that is being developed through both proposed Plan Change 6 and the Ruataniwha water storage. The brownish dot in the middle of the chart is, if you like, the current state of both environmental and economic benefits. The Council has argued in its submissions on proposed Plan Change 6 for increases in minimum flows, reduced allocations, seasonal allocations, and a large number of other things, removing the major sources of phosphorus from the river, limiting phosphorus, limiting nitrogen, applying new nutrient management rules in the river. And there are significant environmental benefits as a consequence of those proposed changes. It's acknowledged by Council, I believe, in its submissions that Plan Change 6 on its own has a significant negative economic impact, which is why the blue dot that says PC6 state is higher on the environmental benefit scale and lower on the economic benefit scale in this chart. Our view, in which we have put to the Board of Inquiry, and I'll present that argument in a little more detail in a second, is that together the RWSS and Plan Change 6 have slightly greater environmental benefits than Plan Change 6 on its own. And so the blue dot on the right-hand side of this chart is slightly higher on environmental benefits, and I'll step through why that's the case. But it's substantially greater in terms of economic benefits. This isn't to scale, but the proportions shown here are approximately right. As I will say, the economic benefits of the RWSS are in the order of $250 million a year, and the economic disbenefit of Plan Change 6 on its own would appear to be in the order of $50 million a year. So the ratio between the shift to the left and the shift to the right on economic benefits shown here is approximately correct. Excuse me. And lastly, as in context, there's a rather complicated overall structure for this project. It's proposed that the project operate as a build, own, operate and transfer project to be run by the organisation in the blue circle called Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership. The Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership will have a concession deed from the Council, and the Council has seen and is currently considering that concession deed. It will also have a project agreement with HBRIC Ltd, as shown on here, which grants a site licence and a number of other things which I won't read out. There are a number of investors who have equity positions or who are proposed to have equity positions in the Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership, HBRIC, a number of institutional investors yet to be confirmed, individual eligible investors in Hawke's Bay with their investment aggregated up through another limited partnership called Tuki Tuki Investments Limited Partnership, Crown Irrigation Investments Limited on the right-hand side, who we are in discussion with about debt financing. Water contracts will be entered into, or water use agreements with landowners to purchase water at the price that we will talk about shortly. And at the end of the 70-year period, except to the extent that local eligible investors through tuki investments and potentially local iwi, to the extent that they own a proportion of Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership, they will retain their equity rights in that, it is proposed, but the remainder of the ownership of the assets will revert to a post-concession entity, to the council or HBRIC or whatever kind of organisation there is in that space at that time. I'd like now, Chairman, if I can, to quite quickly step through the noting recommendations.